Quick introduction. My name is Jason Bauer Clapp. I use he, him pronouns, and I am a career advisor, associate director of Smith Lazar Center for Career Development. And one of my roles is to serve as the pre-law advisor within the Career Center. Hopefully we can cover some of the fundamentals, timeline, process, application, need to know sorts of things for those of you who are thinking about law school as a potential path post-graduation. Before we get into that, I want to give a huge thank you to the Pre-Law Society for sort of letting me crash their idea here and kind of run with it and expand that. So I want to acknowledge that. And also hand over the floor for a few minutes to let Carrie and anyone else just talk a little bit about the organization. So I'll zip it for a few minutes and hand off to you.
Thanks, Jason. Hi, everyone. I recognize some of your names and faces, but if you don't know me, my name's Carrie. I'm a junior, and I am the president of the Pre-Law Society here at Smith. And so, yeah, we were thinking of kind of doing a similar event, and it just so happened that Jason wanted to do this applying to law school event. So we were like, why not collab on it? So yeah, we are just a club where we talk about the law, we talk about, applying to law school. We try to provide a lot of resources in terms of, talking with alums, talking with current law students. We want to have practicing attorneys come speak, and providing LSAT resources. So we just want to be a space where we can help you in wherever you are in your law school journey. So if you ever want to come to an event or just hang out with us, we're hoping to maybe do a Legally Blonde movie night sometime. So if you want to come to that, you can come to that. So if you want to get in touch with us, you can follow us on Instagram at scprelaw. You could request to join on the Smith social network. That's a great way for us to have your email. So if any of my executive team members want to say anything, go ahead.
I would just hop in and say wherever you are and thinking about law school, the society is definitely very open to whatever stage kind of you're at, whether you've already taken the LSAT and you're like ready to go to law school, or you're like just pondering the idea and don't even know what that would involve. You're more than invited to join any of our meetings and plans and events moving forward. And either way, follow us on Instagram to stay in touch with whatever we're doing.
Great. And really, truly, I mean, I think if you're thinking about professional school like law school, you go through the application process. Yes, that's a lot of work that you are doing, but that does not mean that this process is a solo endeavor. It is a team effort. And so thinking about the people around you, your peers, the connections that you can make, the conversations you can have to inform your own process, it is really, really wise. So I would absolutely invite you to connect with the society and move forward from there. But let's just kind of move forward here. And when we think about law school, sometimes it's useful just to step back and to say, so what are the things that tend to be important and helpful and et cetera, if I am thinking about law school? What are the things that I'm going to need to reflect in some form if I want to move forward with this process? And so some of these things might be pretty self-evident, or maybe at least not a surprise for you. We know across the board that law school, that type of learning, that type of education, that type of thinking really favors people who have experience, have strengths in the ability to read critically, to write, and particularly in a persuasive way. Really to be thorough in how they reason through problems and analytical in how they reason through problems. Certainly strong academics, reflected through GPA, reflected through coursework that you've taken, are going to be important. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. And I mean, let's not forget, law school is school. It's challenging school, and so it's helpful to be in a mindset of, yeah, I really like this way of working and of thinking, and I am motivated by that rigor. So those are all things that are going to be really important in your own way. for moving forward and thinking about what would you need to be successful, both as a law school applicant, but also as a law student. Certainly engagement outside of academics as well, whether that is the job that you're doing to help pay for your education, whether it's through campus organizations, athletics, internships, all those types of things. We know law schools really do value applicants who are just connected, who are engaged. And that does not mean active in 27 different organizations. They're looking for kind of deep substantive engagement over spreading oneself really, really thin just to be on mailing lists of many, many organizations. And a question that does come up, sometimes is what's the right major? What should I major in if law school is my path? And, the short, simple answer is major in what you love, major in a discipline that you care about, that you're invigorated by. There's no really best major for law school, with a little asterisk there, as you can see, that if you happen to be particularly interested in IP law and that sort of work, having a STEM background in some capacity is going to be helpful. And if you find your passions and your energies gravitate towards something like tax law, for example, there you go. Having more of a quantitative background is certainly going to be helpful there. In terms of timing, so this is another question that does come up quite a bit. Sometimes people share ideas of, well, going right after my undergrad is really the best time because I'm going to have that momentum and that inertia, and I don't want to forget how to be a student or whatever. And that may be true, that may be useful for some people, but that doesn't mean that's the right answer for everybody. It really does depend on just your readiness, your ability, your clarity to say, yep, I am all in, I am committed, I have this conviction to move forward and to continue to be a student. Longer term purpose, right? Remember that law school is not an end, it's a means to a longer term sort of profession and pursuit. So one thing that law schools really do look for, and this is primarily coming through a personal statement, which we'll talk more about in a few minutes, is your sense of intention and purpose. They want to hear from you, how do you know, right? And how have you come to that conclusion, and why this path versus any other path you could take. So, really, hopefully doing what you need to do, get the information you need to get, such that if and when you decide to apply to law schools, you have a lot of clarity about that path and where you want to take it long term. Certainly engaging in legal work, in policy work, in advocacy work, talking with people who are already out there in the field, talking with alumni, those kinds of things can be really, really useful. More information, more perspectives from people who maybe have already been down these paths and who have maybe wrestled with some of the questions that you're thinking about. Certainly any time where you talk with someone who's already out there in the field, each person you talk with is an N of one. It does not mean that their experience and what has worked for them is what is going to work for you, of course, but when you can talk with people about how they've made their decisions and what worked for them and what didn't work for them, oftentimes that can inform your own process. And then, the finances, of course, are going to be a significant thing to be mindful of for many people as well. Of what does the timing allow for you in terms of that financial commitment? For what it's worth, nationally, about 2/3 of L1s, 2/3 of first-year law students have been out of their undergrad for at least a year or so. So whether they've worked, whether they've done a fellowship, whatever it may be. Lots of things to consider when you're thinking about law schools. Of course, we know there are the big overall rankings. And, if you hear the term, if you've heard T1 or Tier 1 schools, typically that refers to the kind of top dozen, top 14 schools. We can all probably name many of them. Just the ones that traditionally, overall, they are the brand name highest ranked schools. And, Of course that matters. There's one school of thought out there that says apply to a bunch of law schools, and if you get an offer from several, go to the one that's the highest ranked and you're good to go. I think there's more nuance to things than that, but I have heard people share that idea. It's just really, really good that when you're considering these broad stroke rankings, just pay attention to what goes into those rankings. As an example, I believe that the U.S. News World Report rankings of law schools, roughly 40% of that weighting is a reputation score drawn from professionals in the field and at other law schools. So people who are already in the field who say, yeah, I think this school has a really high reputation. It's sort of a self-perpetuating kind of thing, right? Not to say that it's false, that it's misleading, but something like that versus a school's resources spent on students is a rather small part of the rankings, right? So again, I'm not suggesting don't pay attention to the rankings. Of course, pay attention to them, but just understand what goes into those rankings. And also think about, strength and training for your intended practice area. Sometimes a school that may be a little lower in overall rankings may be exceptionally strong in the practice area that you're really drawn to. Okay, one example, if you're interested in sort of social justice law and those types of things, City University of New York is an exceptional school. When you look at the overall rankings, it doesn't really tend to end up in that T1. But if that's the kind of work that you're interested in, that's a program to pay attention to. So think about that too. Diversity, inclusivity, affinity organizations, student groups, those types of things that are available within the schools that you're looking at can be very important just in terms of feeling a sense of connection and community. Geography, of course, many people may be drawn towards, I want to be on the West Coast. I don't want to be on the West Coast. I want to be in the DC area. I want to be close to friends, whatever it may be. And, especially if you have some thoughts about where you may want to be post law school, it may be helpful to think about, the connections of law schools within that area. Also think about, different schools, different programs are going to have different access to the law clinics, right? These are the really hands-on practice, oftentimes serving communities, serving the local communities and helping people kind of practice their craft and hone their craft in a supervised way. Those clinics can be really, really great ways to try on different practice areas to, like I said, hone your craft and all that sort of stuff. So pay attention to those things when you're thinking about law schools, if that's an important thing for you. And, other things, right? I mean, the schools that are the top choices for you needs to be really an individual decision. And so there may be other factors that you are considering as well. So where to think about law schools, right? So there's somewhere in the range of 190, 194 roughly ABA accredited law schools. That's a lot to go through. Your primary resource through this process is going to probably be LSAC, Law School Admissions Council. You can see the link right there. If you haven't been there yet, put it on your to-do list to go check it out. They do law school forums throughout the year. Oftentimes summer, fall is a pretty active time for them. They used to do in person, of course. Now there's more hybrid and virtual types of things meant for aspiring law school students to learn more about different programs and how to evaluate those. They have a choosing a law school database. They have a tool, it's a little buried, but one tool allows you to look at past admission data from law schools and sort of kind of calibrate, all right, students with this undergraduate GPA and this LSAT score, what was the likelihood of them getting an admit offer at this program? It is removed by a year and a half in terms of kind of data reporting cycles. And I would say, don't make your decision as to where to apply solely on those on those data, but they can help you, again, kind of calibrate a little bit of, okay, based on my numbers or my expected numbers, this school's probably going to be a bigger reach for me. And that's okay, right? But sometimes it's just useful for you to know that ahead of time. Law school is one of those settings, one of those sort of professional school situations where the numbers of the LSAT and the GPA do matter significantly. They are not the whole story. Every law school admissions person that I've talked with, that I've heard talk, says we consider holistically. Moving forward too, certainly every law school is going to have its own website saying, look how great we are. Here's why you want to come here. Look at all our fancy things that we have available for you. Of course, many of them have just gladly adopted this virtual thing and said, now we can do, 3 panels a week and people can dial in whenever and whatever and all this sort of stuff. And, those are not going to go away. So if there are schools that are on your wish list or your watch list that, you can kind of pay attention to and see, are they doing some sessions upcoming? Are they having current students do a little panel about their experience? See if you can tune into some of those and kind of soak up what they're offering there. The 509 report. So this is something that every ABA accredited school has to publish, and it's basically their output of data of, okay, who did we, not who, like in terms of names, but kind of the numbers of our admitted students and, their sort of credentials coming in, who's currently enrolled. They look at employment data for graduates. They look at percentage of graduates who have passed the bar. So, when you're looking at schools and you're trying to do kind of a side-by-side, apples-to-apples comparison, look for those 509 reports. Oftentimes they're pretty easy to find, but if not, do a search, 509 report, whatever law school. And then again, going back to this idea we already mentioned a little bit of talking with people who are already out there, talking with lawyers, talking with policymakers, talking with people who've been through the law school process for themselves. Again, every person you're going to talk to is their own story. You may get wildly contradictory perspectives from them. But if you're talking with several people and you're finding some trends, you're finding some themes that seem to resonate for you, that's a useful piece to keep in mind. So the finances piece, so I just wanted to touch on this really briefly. This could be its own session for sure. Law school is expensive. Law schools assume that pretty much every student is going to have some significant skin in the game, as they say, in terms of financial considerations. So most people who are in law school are financing through loans. If you can qualify for federal loans, maybe supplement with private loans. There are some grant scholarship types of things that may be available. The chances of getting a full ride to a program, that's really, really rare. It may happen, but do expect that you're going to be doing some outlay in terms of funds, and you may get some support through scholarships or those types of things. Again, LSAC is a really good resource there. They've got good information about financial aid and how to think about that, and even the timing of things. And then below that, so this accesslex.org, this is a really interesting organization. This is free for you to sign up for, to register for, really meant as a resource to help law students, aspiring law students, think through the overall process and recognize and do their due diligence, so to speak, in terms of financing, application stuff, finding schools, et cetera. So both of those, I think, are really good sources to check out, to register for, just to kind of map out ahead of time of what this could look like for you. So shifting ahead, so a lot of people kind of ask about the time frame here. And so what I tried to do is map this out a little bit to give a sense of what are phases as opposed to specific dates. And this is mapped out with kind of an 18 months lead time, let's just say. So in other words, if you happen to be in a situation where you're thinking about, I would like to be starting my first year of law school in the fall of 2022. If you were to then wind back the clock here to bring us to where we're at right now, spring, for you now would be really the time to be thinking about where do you want to be potentially applying to. Now would certainly be a reasonable time to be starting to do some prep for the LSAT. Now would be the time to be talking with faculty or supervisors or other people that you've worked with and who know your work, not necessarily to yet ask for recommendation letters, but at least to involve them in the conversation that this is something that you are seriously thinking about in terms of your post-Smith plans. And again, I'll come back to that in a little bit, but seeking recommendation letters should be an ongoing conversation versus a one-time transactional email. Will you please write me a letter? So we'll circle back to that though. And even now, even if it feels like this is a long ways off, starting to think about for yourself, what are some ideas about your motivations, about the story that you may want to share in a personal statement? I think the sooner that you can start to just capture some raw ideas, the sooner that you can start to brainstorm things, the better it can be in terms of your overall writing process for those statements. And then if we were to shift ahead to this summer, many people will use the summer before their kind of application time to be doing more LSAT prep. Maybe they would take the LSAT as early as June or maybe August. More time really spent drafting the personal statement. Summer is where things get to be a bit more active and more concrete steps, if you will. Thinking about prioritizing your school choices. What are going to be your top schools? How many do you think you're going to apply to? Within LSAC, so there's the CAS, so lots of acronyms in this space, of course, but the Credential Assembly Service, you want to register for that because that's where all of your application materials are going to go, and then that's how they then get dispersed to the schools that you apply to. So you can register yourself for that. And then certainly if summer is a good time for you to be doing an internship or research or something like that in law, in advocacy, in something related to that, great. If you're doing something in a field unrelated, but it's still important to you, maybe that's okay too. Excuse me. And then maybe shifting ahead to really fall here. So this is when things get more active because the application period for law schools tends to start in September or October. So that's when things open up. You do not have to apply on day one. But this is the time where you want to really confirm your letter writers, give them the information that they need about where you're applying and why, and all those types of things. Many people will be taking the LSAT at this time, maybe earlier in the fall, to give themselves a little time of, if they don't get the score that they really thought that they could get, they may still have time later in the fall to retake it within the application timeframe. The rule of thumb here is if you have a top choice school or maybe a pair of top choice schools, try to get things in by mid to late November. So historically kind of around US Thanksgiving time. And then, after you go through the application process, you put in your materials, maybe that's done by the start of the new year, then it is hurry up and wait. I think it's useful though, even to be thinking about just as a plan B, what if this doesn't work out, or what if something comes up for you and you decide that you need to change directions or something like that. I would say don't just wait to see what am I going to get in terms of admit offers. Just be thinking about what are some other possibilities just in case. There are some, there's a line here about interviews ? There are some law programs that do interviews with some of their applicants. It's not, I wouldn't say that is the norm yet, but I've heard more and more schools that are building an interview into their process. A lot of decisions will start to come out around mid-February into March. And those decisions could be a yes. They could be, we're going to put you on a wait list. They could be no thanks. By the way, I didn't mention the early decision piece. There is an early decision option that schools may offer as well. If you apply by this date, we promise to give you a decision by this date. So that would be baked into this process in the fall. And then oftentimes you get those decisions, and then we get into right about this time of year where people are at that decision point. They're evaluating their offers. They're thinking about, okay, which one's going to be the best fit? What decision do I want to commit to? Decide, here's my yes, and politely tell everybody else thanks, but no thanks. There's going to be a deposit that you need to take care of to hold your spot, all those types of things. Okay, so this is a long process. This is not the exact map that everybody needs to follow, but hopefully it gives you a sense of what this time frame can look like and how to build in enough space to be thorough with how you go about this process. So let's shift gears a little bit and just think about the application components themselves. So if you're going to apply, what are the parts to that? So again, as we've already mentioned, many of you probably already know, so there's the LSAT, Law School Admission Test. Over the past year, it has been the LSAT Flex, which is the take-home version of that, or the at-home version of that, more properly. And the LSAT Flex is going to continue to be offered for the coming year. And I think we may also see some in-person offerings of that as well. I think we're still going to wait and see on that. So that's one component of your application, a very important component. Your transcript, your undergraduate transcript. Letters of recommendation. This varies a little bit school by school. Some require one. Some say you can have one, as few as one and as many as four. 2 to 3 tends to be the most common. And just a note about letters of recommendation. So think about just people who know you well, people who have seen you at your best, people who you feel confident can be cheerleaders for you, advocates for you and your ability to succeed and thrive in law school. Oftentimes that is faculty. Again, maybe it's someone else who has another perspective of you and your work. Think about, the substance of the letter or the likely substance of the letter over the signature of the letter. In other words, some people have asked, well, if I have this, I don't know this person really, really well, but they are really well known and respected in their field. What is that somebody I should pursue there? And I think, someone who may be very, very well known, but can't say much of substance about you may not be all that helpful to the admissions committees. The personal statement, which I'll talk more about in just a few minutes, but this is the place where you tell your story, you share your why, you really connect with the admissions people to say, here's what's bringing me to do this as a next step. And then a resume, this can be 1 page, 2 pages. This is something that just provides more broader context for the things that you've been involved with most recently. By the way, I have heard this loud and clear from law school admissions committees. They do not want to see high school. College and beyond is what's going to end up on a resume for law school. There may be some other components, kind of depending on specific circumstances. If you need the TOEFL, sometimes there's space to do what they call an addendum. If you happen to have one really bumpy semester academically or some other type of thing, and you need to offer a brief clarifying explanation, an addendum could be a place to do that. This is not a long-winded type of thing by any means. This could be 2 or 3 sentences of here's what happened, the end. Some schools allow or request a diversity statement, which may be applicable. Every application at some point is going to have sort of a character and fitness statement. So this is the kind of thing, if you happen to have had whether it was prior legal issue, something like that, or an honor code violation, something like that, that's not necessarily going to derail your application to law school. This is the kind of thing where if you have something like that that has come up in your past, it's better to disclose, say, here's what happened, here's where I'm at now, here's what I learned from that, than to not disclose and hope they don't find out. Be honest. And again, that would be very, very individual circumstances. So if anyone has specific questions about that, we could talk offline out of the context of this meeting. All right, so the LSAT itself, so just some general background about this. So this is 3 main sections to it: logical, analytical, and then reading comprehension. There has been in the regular LSAT, there's an unscored section as well that LSAC uses just in terms of sort of test analysis. There's a writing sample piece that is a separate piece. You don't have to take at the same time. In fact, I think that opens up about a week before the actual assessment that you would take. Score range 120 to 180. It's administered roughly every other month. Kind of varies right there. I think there's one in June, there's one in August, I think maybe one in September. And again, you'll see that on the LSAC website. And you take it, and then your scores come out after about 3 weeks. You're allowed to take it up to 3 times within each August through July cycle. And I would say it's not unusual for people to retake it. If somebody takes it and feels like they were really having an off day, or some technical glitch came up or something like that, and they feel like, look, based on that experience, based on my practice tests and my estimated scores through those, I think I can give this another shot. Sometimes that's a reasonable thing to do. The way it works is that when you apply to a school, they're going to receive all of your reportable scores, but many of them have said, we're going to look at the highest score. And then moving forward, so another, as I mentioned a little earlier, another really critical component of any law school application is your personal statement. And this varies school by school in terms of what the prompt may be, or there may not be a prompt. It could be as simple as, please write a personal statement. It could be more specific. Yale has its own thing, for example. They call it the Yale 250, 250 words, which they've put a little bit of a focus prompt on it. So this is going to vary school by school. But even within that, oftentimes, if you're planning to apply to several schools, you might be able to kind of reframe the same fundamental story, the same fundamental statement for multiple programs. Just kind of change some of the specifics to make it fit within the parameters that are given. So just because you might be applying to 6 law schools doesn't mean you're writing from scratch 6 totally different personal statements. Again, this is about providing them with the context, with the glue or the through line between the other parts of their application, so they understand why, how you came to this decision. What is it about this as your path that they need to know to understand you as an applicant? And it really is the connection. Okay, they'll see your LSAT, they'll see your GPA and the courses that you've taken through your transcript. They'll get the recommender, so they get that kind of outside perspective of who you are as a student, what your professional goals may be. Your personal statement is where you tie it all together. Again, this is the kind of thing where I don't think you can start too early in capturing ideas and drafting ideas. And I can tell you, I've seen over time that people that have given themselves plenty of time and space to let their statements evolve, emerge, iterate, get feedback throughout that process, they end up with things that are much more honed, focused, clear, compelling. And this is a quote actually I got from one law school admissions person. And I think that it's really kind of an interesting way to frame this. If they said, look, law school is not for spectators. This is not for people who naturally sit on the sidelines. So part of the opportunity within your personal statement is to show that you are someone who is in the arena, as the old Teddy Roosevelt quote is, of you've been engaged, you've found ways to tap into the resources that are around you and connect with the people who are around you, or connect with people who you may not have already been connected with. And sometimes it's useful to think about, if you're stuck with, well, what do I even write? Where do I start? Just step back and think about not what would you write, but if you had a chance to just talk with a few admissions people at your top choice law school, and they said, great, you're here. It's nice to be talking with you. Just tell us about you and help us understand why this. Think about what you might say. And sometimes that can give some good insight or some good raw ideas for what you might want to share within that statement. Again, be concise, be compelling. This phrase comes up over and over again in law school admissions of use good judgment regarding personal disclosures. The idea here is be personal. Of course, they want to get to know you, but there's a point at which things can be overly raw and confessional and can really be a turnoff for readers as well. So it's thinking about what are stories that are authentic for you, but not to the point that it can kind of make people shy away from engaging with your statement. And one tip, is as you're drafting, you get close to that version, you're at a point where you feel like, yep, I said what I want to say here. I like the way that it's crafted. I like the way that it's delivered. If you can then give yourself the time and the space to say, great, I'm going to set it aside for a week. I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to look at it, and then come back to it with fresh eyes. That can just help you confirm, yep, I'm happy with this delivery, or got to change one other thing, two other things. So just some kind of general information if you're curious. So we do see a number of people who have attended Smith who go on to law school. In general, this number varies a little bit, but historically for Smith applicants, it's ranged about an 80% success rate for people who've applied and who get admittance to one or more schools. So that's certainly a nice number. Typically, people who are applying to law schools might be aiming for 6, 7, 8, 9 schools. That's kind of, if you think about it as kind of a normal distribution, that's kind of the high point of the curve. I've talked with people in the past who apply to one school. They say, this is the only place I want to go. This is the only program I'm interested in. Great. I think I've talked with someone in the past who had at one point plans to apply to 14 or 15. Again, kind of be thoughtful about what makes sense for you, the schools that are truly of interest for you based on your own priorities and your own goals there. For what it's worth too, within the past year, the past application cycle, law school applications were up significantly from the prior year. And so, where in the past people may have applied to slightly fewer schools, some of the advice, some of the suggestions now are just kind of cast a slightly wider net, maybe add one other school to your option list just to see. And again, as you can see here, just kind of looking at the data that I was able to access here, over the past kind of 3 years, three kind of admission cycles, if you will, roughly about 90 Smithies, either as seniors or people who are graduates and have been out for a while, about 90. It's kind of varies between 20 to 35 year to year in terms of the number of people from Smith graduates who have applied to law schools. Okay. One other thing I just want to make people aware of. So Smith, through the dean of the college office, so they have the prize competitions there, and there are 2 prizes that are available to people who are planning to pursue law. One is the David Burris Memorial Law Prize, and you can see I just quoted pieces from the actual prize descriptions. It's not the full description for either of these awards, but I wanted folks to be aware that these are out there. These are things that, depending on your circumstances, may be of interest for you to apply to. So these are, financial awards to be mindful of. And as you can see there, I think both of them, the applications for these are due towards the end of April. There's an application. I think you need some recommendations for those as well. So look in the Dean of the College page. There's a prize competition section, and there's a bunch of boxes there that you can click on. And one of those is prize competitions for study of law or public policy. And you'll see both of those listed there. And kind of on the home stretch here for this conversation. So kind of support and resources broadly. So again, myself, Jason, so I'm currently serving as the pre-law advisor for the Lazarus Center. So I'm happy to talk with people if you're just sort of thinking about law school. Is this the right path for you, or one of the paths that you may be considering, and just want to do some brainstorming about that, all the way to thinking about how to prioritize schools. Certainly happy to review personal statement drafts and offer some feedback on those, even to the point of, if people are getting offers and just, again, want to kind of bounce some ideas in terms of which schools might be the better fit, how do I make those decisions? Those kinds of things. Of course, I can't make those decisions for you, of course not, but if it's useful just to kind of let's air these out and let's talk through them. I'm happy to help with that. Again, of course, the Pre-Law Society here are our co-sponsors today. There is a Facebook group for Legal Smithies. So if you're a Facebook user, you may want to check that out and see what they're up to. Faculty, certainly the people that you're working with, whether they are JDs by their own background or have been engaged with that sort of work in some capacity, talk with them about your interests, talk with them about their experiences and their recommendations, get their insight, get their perspectives on things. And one other thing that I want to make you aware of, so this is relatively new that we have this partnership with the Princeton Review. So many of you may know this organization, that they offer test prep courses, including test prep for the LSAT. And one of their online prep courses is available to Smith students and recent graduates at a significant discount, basically half price that they're able to offer it. So this is an online course. You need to sign up for it a few weeks in advance so that there's time for everything to get processed and for them to send materials to you. But if this is potentially of interest to you, go into Handshake, go into your Handshake account, and in the Career Center resources section, there's a whole article piece that talks about Princeton Review prep course options and how to go through that process and how to register. For LSAT prep, the LSAC partnered with the Khan Academy, which probably most of us are familiar with. The Khan Academy has set up their own LSAT prep course. It is free to use. It was developed in partnership with LSAC. I've heard really, really good reviews of that Khan Academy course. And so if you're kind of digging in to some initial test prep or thinking about, okay, what is this LSAC going to look like? How do I get myself ready for this? Check out the Khan Academy course. And then just sort of closing again. So I'm happy to talk with anyone, whether you are all in on this, you are already in process, you are applying, but just want to kind of talk through some ideas. Happy to talk with you. If you're at the point of saying, I'm not really sure, I'm thinking about a lot of things, maybe law school, I'm happy to talk with you. And again, like I said, too, personal statements, looking for some review of that. So if you have quick questions, you're welcome to email me. My email is right there. Otherwise, if you want to meet, go through Handshake, schedule a meeting with me. There's a separate category for pre-law advising. There's also, if you were to go to the Lazarus Center's YouTube page, so we hosted a panel discussion in the fall, I think it was early October, where we had a couple of Smith alumni who have JDs themselves, but also, but now work at law schools themselves, where they just did a conversation about law school applications, those kinds of things. And it's really good. It's about an hour, but it's really rich material there. So if you didn't attend that or haven't come across that video, take a look at it. It's worth viewing. Lots of great info there. And then one other piece that I want to share is on the Lazarus Center page, one of our main sections is called Professional Pathways. And what we try to do is gather some kind of big, broad, kind of meta sectors of professional fields, of career fields. One of them is called Government, International Affairs, Law, and Policy. Of course, that's a big field. There's a lot of things in there. But within that, we've provided some general information. We've provided some good resources, some links, some professional organizations, even some kind of job search sites, those kinds of things, just as a collection of starting points for people who maybe are interested in these areas. Hopefully this was some useful information. Maybe if it's confirming stuff you already knew, maybe if it's adding some new things, but certainly this is just meant to be kind of a starting point and an overview of some fundamentals. So if it's useful to reconnect with me, to become involved in the Pre-Law Society, if you're not already involved with them and working with them, I would invite you to do that. And again, I'll say thank you for being here.